Thank you, Sean, and welcome everybody. I'm very excited to be hosting this special breakout session at CXNext. My name is Nick Pegram. I'm a director at LogMeIn. My main responsibilities are focused on Bold 360, which is our digital engagement platform that uses AI, self-service, and chatbot technologies. And our subject for this session is the move from voice to digital. But before we get into the theme and subject in more detail, I'd like to introduce to you our very special guest, Tiffany St. James. Tiffany is an award-winning global digital strategist and has been identified as one of 25 women who have helped shape digital industry in the last 25 years. So welcome, Tiffany. Thank you very much for joining us today. Where do we start? I mean, it's hard not to sound too dramatic, but when we're in an environment where the CEO of Barclays is referencing the notion of putting 7,000 people in a building may be a thing of the past. Obviously, I'm referring to the real estate in Canary Wharf, and the Barclays HQ. And he's then saying the company is now being run by staff from their kitchens. It starts to really focus the mind and the change and the adoption that needs to take place for companies and also governments and societies to survive through COVID-19. So we're seeing this natural acceleration of digital tools, security, connectivity, collaboration, applications and support to empower remote workforces in order to keep up with digital demands. With our theme from voice to digital, although we understand that actually voice is a traditional channel, it's not going away. And certainly voice chatbots are increasing in adoption. There's suddenly huge pressure for digital transformation programs to be completed. So Tiffany, we've spoken a few times, and I haven't told you this, but I'm very confident that you're an optimist. But in reality, we're all very excited to hear from you and hear about what kind of impact is happening specifically around customer experience and society due to COVID-19. Now, before I hand over to Tiffany, there will be Q&A, so please ask your questions throughout the session and we'll be summing up and I'll be putting some of those pertinent points to Tiffany at the end. So Tiffany, over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick. And you're absolutely right. I am an optimist, and I'm even an optimist in the current situation. There's many opportunities as well as absolutely, let's to be clear, some challenges as well. So I'm delighted to be invited to be able to share some thoughts and points of view and some examples of where some companies are really getting it right, and hopefully some takeaways for us all to be able to look at how we can change and adapt our customer experience and our customer engagement in this new world. So I want to be able to share kind of, 4 big principles and how we see the world has changed that kind of at a high level affect customer experience. And then I'll go through some, really particular kind of examples and look at some really clear ways in which that customer experience and customer engagement has been affected with some good examples and takeaways. So we know that the world is changing and has changed. And I'm not going to go through all of the ways in which that, but just looking today through that customer experience lens, like we know, and as you clearly said regarding Barclays, working from home is the new normal. And many organizations, and interesting to hear kind of Barclays' point of view about that too, are considering what they do about their office space when perhaps social distance is lifted. Many organizations that we hear are considering 25% of the people from working from home permanently, or looking at how they reduce their workforce or enable more people to work from home on a permanent basis. And why I think this is really interesting, there's been a dynamic trust in how employees and employers have regarded each other. There's always been the sneaking suspicion in an employee's heart that they're not really trusted when they're working from home. And actually, I think employers have been surprised and delighted by the fact that people have been more productive. They've got less of the bumping into each other in the coffee mornings. They've got perhaps, as many meetings, but really, really using that kind of productive space really well. So I think there's a dynamic shift in, employee and employer engagement within that. We know that people are learning new tools, new ways of living and new ways of behaving. So really having to adapt very swiftly. We've all had to work from home to get to grips with new technology, but also the children are getting to grips with new technology. They're having to now do schoolwork virtually or, feedback schoolwork virtually. And then people themselves are having, as employees and our customers, having to negotiate their own lives, their working lives, as well as, the parental lives in the family environment. So, that's completely changed in the working from home. And what that's engendered is, technology being seen as a force for good. Many of us believe that and know that to be true to start with. But I think people who had already not perhaps realized that as much, it's shifted the kind of dynamic view of, technology is enabling us to be able to carry on work and to carry on school in that regard. So that's kind of one of the big, things that we've seen. So the next is really around how digital migration has accelerated. We know that perhaps digital transformation, large programs might have been stalled and put on hold while we've had to, work out how we're going to work together in this, current environment. But what it has meant is that organizations immediately have had to use dynamic cloud-based software to be able to carry on working and be able to really get to grips with that. And that's technology and serving in both their employees and their customers in being able to use that. And again, what that's led towards is, the kind of hopes for technology and what technology might be able to achieve for us in the present situation that we're in. You only have to see, great apps like, Join Zoe, where people put in every day how they're feeling. So there's symptoms of whether they might have contracted COVID, to be able to analyze all that. So we have organizations looking at how we crunch that data and how we track, perhaps the spread, and then the enablement to look at kind of social distancing and how that might be alleviated. So there's hopes for technology and being able to solve, some of the problems that we currently see ourselves in. And one of the things that has just been just an absolute joy to observe is the rise of empathy. Empathy as a leadership skill was mentioned on most stages in the last 12 months. It was mentioned even at the last Davos event, the World Economic Forum, about empathetic leaders bringing your whole self to work and having empathy as a human being. Organizations being significant and having empathy with their employees and consumers has been a huge generalization and a huge change that we've seen in business. But nowhere has that come to the fore more relevant than during the period that we currently see ourselves in. How many emails start, "How are you? I hope you're well," and then who sign off, "Stay safe." And I think that's a remarkable shift, and one that hopefully will remain whenever our social distancing restrictions lift. So they're the big four things that we're seeing at a high level. But really, like, kind of drilling down into how is that useful and practical for us looking at customer experience. And, there's three things that it's worth kind of calling out to start with before we go into more detail. And that's, customer metrics have changed. We used to be concerned about customer satisfaction scores and, digital funnels of our customers, and maybe our net promoter score is a way of measuring customer satisfaction. And what's happened right now is we have to be acutely aware of the personal and professional circumstances of our customers to be able to respond to those. And customers will feel, and it will stay with them quite a long time, how you are responding to them in this period that we're currently in, during and post-COVID. They will have a viewpoint about how you have treated them within this period of time. And actually, that's going to build longer term trust and loyalty about how empathetic you are as an individual and how your business is treating them and about how you're caring about them. So, just the kind of call to action is be really mindful about how you're dealing with the people who, both your employees and your customers at this particular time. And another point really in terms of the environment of now which we're working in is that requirements are changing, and they're changing in real time, and they're changing incredibly fast. And we have to now think much more on our feet and think more innovatively about how we might be able to respond to our customers' changing requirements, because what they are now is different than they were 2 months ago. Let's be absolutely clear. And of course, that's going to be different again over the next couple of months as we come into COVID recovery. But the recovery is likely to be quite a long time. So changing customer needs and responding to changing customer needs and that innovation is super fast, helping you to make those decisions both, emotionally and empathetically, but using good technology to be able to understand how that's changing to help them at speed is going to put everyone in good stead. So there's a couple of kind of specific areas, not just in the kind of empathetic help, where we've seen great examples, and I want to share some of those with you because I think they're inspiring and they will give other people perhaps examples. So the first kind of area is in terms of kind of care and connection, and essentially in this time we should be supporting our customers, not marketing at them. Okay, and we're talking about really kind of supporting
Yeah,
them, really finding out what
yeah,
they want, who they are, and what they need right now. And there's kind of three areas really. The first is looking at employees. So the first thing we to do, who's delivering this great customer experience and this great customer service? It's all of our employees, right? So we need to
yeah,
have to make sure that we look after them. And I read something this week, just a quote that really tickled me and resonated with me. And it said, "You're not working from home. You're working during a global pandemic, looking after your children and trying to home educate while keeping your mental health and the mental health of your family sane, and having to work remotely at the same time." And, that's a much wider context than it's okay, I'm just working from home at the moment. And, that's the situation our employees in, the expectation and the weight of the great customer experience weighing on their shoulder. And a company that I see have got this right is Marriott. Actually, they looked at all the financials, and obviously, hotel chain globally being hit
yeah,
massively by nobody traveling or staying there. To be able to share the financial details of the impact of the crisis with their employees, and share with them how the management were taking a pay cut, and being able to look at what packages of care that they could still sustain for their employees, and be real open about it. So it's some good example. And then in terms of kind of care and connections, obviously, how are we caring for our customers? And there's a couple of different companies that have done this quite well. So if you look at Ford Motor Cars, they kind of immediately looked at what are the payment plans for vehicles that they're selling for customers, or offering kind of payment relief on credit terms. And we've seen that replicated in many banks around the world, and we've seen it replicated in mortgage companies giving payment holidays, and we've seen that obviously in some credit cards giving kind of months off payments, and the opportunity to offer immediate kind of financial relief, or a financial holiday period is good practice that we've seen in many organizations. There's been sort of kind of creative smaller play in the universities in America, there, where they had to kind of leave and go home for their social distancing very quickly. Storage companies around American universities let students store things for free so they could quickly shift. And that's just looking at what do people need right now, and how can I help them, and making those kind of relationships for the longer term. And then you can see companies, that have just taken their sports marketing and entertainment budget, knowing that there's nothing or very little that they can do right now, and just ploughed that into good causes. So Budweiser did that by donating their entertainment budget over this period to the American Red Cross, for example. So how we're really looking after our customers, there's some real practical ways there. But also there's a kind of third way really, which is looking after the community. So where this has come particularly to the fore is looking at luxury goods companies, perhaps the organizations that produce perfume, and stalling their plants, stopping their perfume, and realizing they can make hand sanitizer with the same equipment, and being able to change that and give that back to the community. We've seen libraries, offering the 3D printing service so that they can make face masks at scale, or giving the opportunity for people to kind of download the patterns to be able to make their own face masks, or to make them for their local NHS trusts, for example, in the UK. And then software providers have been giving educational technology to students and schools and teachers that they might be able to need and use their packages. So in that kind of care and connection piece, if you like, there's how can we look after employees, how can we look after our customers, but also what can we do for the community in that space. So the second area where we've seen some really good examples is looking at understanding really where our customers are. And it's understanding that there are different stages of digital maturity, and there's different journeys that our customers are on. And to leap immediately to a high-end tech package for them might really scare some individuals and not respond to it at all. But it's not to say that we need to necessarily track our innovation along, perhaps the same path that they are on at the moment. But it's just really understanding where they are in their digital maturity. So you have the opportunity perhaps to accelerate more digital options for them, depending on where they are and respecting where they are on their journey at the moment. And we've seen some solutions like that really well delivered, perhaps by Chinese banks, where they've offered a do-it-at-home package, where their customers can be able to do their kind of banking remotely, which wasn't available before. We've seen it with again in Chinese banks, some good examples coming out. Obviously, the virus kind of hit the communities first, so looking at their innovation. And investment houses have been holding online shows to explain to people what's happening in the stock markets and what's happening with their investments, and to be able to guide them through perhaps potential actions. So there's ways in which that we can consider in the digital maturity and digital change how we can potentially help our customers with accelerating digital options for them. There's also the option in terms of kind of bringing your business to them. Now, we've seen that globally with food delivery, and that's an accepted practice. And we've had food delivery, obviously, before the virus hit us. But essentially now we're seeing more and more different types of delivery of different products and services. So the states are getting, pharmacy deliveries of prescriptions out to people's homes. And I've heard of a couple of brilliant car companies offering to come and collect your car, service it, take it away and deliver it back to your home. So what are the opportunities for us who perhaps move in fascinating consumer goods or not just delivered at scale online to offer at-home services for our customers and clients? We know that farmers are doing local delivery, and in London, where I happen to reside, we have the new Covent Garden Market that always served traders, and now has opened up consumer offers to people to be able to help get groceries to them. So there's the at-home delivery, and then there's the kind of the physical operations of kind of mitigating the spread of the virus. Now we've seen that very clearly in compelling people only to use touch payments, not cash, and being able to close down perhaps that interaction within that. But actually there's more than that. We've seen grocery stores putting up sort of physical screens, courtesy screens between sellers and the customers, sneeze screens they're called, to try and help physically the kind of transmission within that. So there's a couple of opportunities when you're looking at understanding where your customers are in their digital maturity to offer online options, to offer in-home options, and then what are the physical options that still be able to help them, which I think is quite interesting. Needless to say, I mean, this is going to bring together a whole host of innovation, and we're starting to see some great examples of that already. People talk all the time about reimagining, a post-COVID world, and I simply don't agree with that. There's not going to be a date where we flick on the switch of social distancing and all go back to exactly the same as normal. I just don't believe that to be the case. I think we should consider from the moment of where we are now, and actually look at the during and post-COVID, because the recovery and the economic recovery is going to take quite a long time. There's a health crisis right now, but actually when we come out of that health crisis, and it was announced in the UK, that's we tipped over the peak in terms of being able to look at the peak infection and into perhaps the decline of that. But we have seen in France and Spain, when they've let people out from social distancing, that the virus has been, so prevalent that they've had to bring people back into lockdown again. So what I would say is, in all our discussions with our customers and employees, and with ourselves and our businesses, let's not reimagine a post-COVID world. Let's work out how we're going to recover from here and in the future. And as that changes, we have to be incredibly proactive and responsive to that. Certainly. In terms of innovation, obviously, and when we come out of the health crisis and there's a huge economic impact on all of our countries, we're going to see that we know that putting services online that weren't previously online are going to save organizations money. We know that a digital interaction and transaction, is often a lower cost, and a significant lower cost than a digital transaction and interaction. But we cannot do that at the cost of customer experience. And they have to be married together, not just because of COVID, but because, people want elegant customer experiences, and not to be able to know that companies are just taking a cheaper option of perhaps saving money by digitizing services. And just I strongly compel everyone to consider having that balance between, yes, saving money and digitizing services, but also really compelling, elegant, user designed, great customer experience with that too. And we've seen innovation in all kinds of interesting ways, because we know it's going to affect, as Nick, you touched on briefly earlier, and I did too within this, like the bricks and mortar trade, the retail opportunities are going to change dramatically. But we've seen already some companies kind of respond to that. So, Nike, for example, have not, may have closed some of their stores, but they're allowing people to try on shoes in the situations that they would use them, and in pop-ups on basketball courts and on soccer fields, and to be able to share that kind of experience of where it needs to be. And I think people are going to need to be really creative. So I'm kind of compelling everyone with the kind of innovation bent, if you like, and to be able to look at how can we now, during post-COVID and that whole kind of transition, look at how we can better enable customer engagement while obviously digitizing some services and being creative, really creative about its kind of delivery. And we know that actually great customer experience and any good digital strategy and digital product innovation comes from looking at data and looking at and defining insight from that data, and taking that insight to help define digital capability and driving strategy. And that has always been the case. I had the great pleasure to work in central government, pre-digital, and we were trained in how to define insights in the centre of public sector advertising that have been the home of it for 60 years. And it's about looking at the information and the data and understanding, what do you perceive as the reality, and your target audience perceive as the reality? What, therefore, creates a reaction in you so strong that you want to, do a physical interaction, you change your behavior, or you do an action as a result of that. And it's really hard to do that in today's society with the volume of information we have that isn't assisted by digital tools or AI technology, to be able to look at what is the human view, and also what is the data-led view, to be able to kind of drill down into huge data sets and insight to be able to help us change our strategy. And I just wanted to give a kind of couple of examples of that and where we've seen that work really well. We know that insight-led data and strategy is not a new thing, okay? Equally as it was in the offline world, as I just described. But in one of the first open data maps was developed by Dr. John Snow in the 1850s, where there was a cholera epidemic in London, and he worked out by walking the streets where the most deaths were, and they were centred around Broadwick Street, a well on Broadwick Street in Soho in London, and it was the Wells water that was affected in the hand pump. He just took off the hand pump, and I just think that is just a fantastic way of being able to describe getting all the data, looking at the inside about it, and doing something in the middle of a crisis to kind of save lives. So data insight strategy isn't new. But actually, the volumes that we now need to look for are new. I mean, I had the great pleasure working in central government during swine flu a decade ago, in the middle of swine flu, and I was head of social media at the time. And we had to, very swiftly look at what could we do. Google was a much more fledgling company then, but we were looking at, can we track the spread of the virus by what people are searching for online to be able to do that? And we now know with, open data, in the past there's been an earthquake in an American city, and tracking the tweets that have surrounded it, you can actually see the epicenter and how far it spread just by, scraping kind of open data fields and being able to look at that information, to look at where you need to deploy your resources and where they're kind of affected from it. And bringing kind of an example into more real time, I'm currently working with a flagship London Borough Council, and one of their objectives is to, look at how they reduce the footfall in their borough so that, social distancing is working. And for that, we're looking at an anonymous mobile phone data. It's not tracking individual people, but it's looking at what are perhaps the types of people that are less likely to abide by social distances, so we can find out why and we can help them and we can kind of help serve them. And there's very many different ways of being able to look at kind of information and to be able to kind of glean that insight. But the last thing I wanted to wrap up on really is about building agile capabilities. When anyone talks about agile, people who are not used to that kind of environment think about software design and the digital design. But actually, it's a mindset and it's a thinking and it's a practice. I always make the analogy with a murmur of starlings, a group moving together in flight in the moment that can change direction really swiftly. So organizations need to understand how better to use agile thinking and agile practice. There's going to be new ways of governing and new ways of leading organizations. We've seen in Washington State 2 years ago, they've moved to a version of holacracy, which is giving power to the front line. In battle terms, that's like a battlefield command. And we've seen that work well in telecommunication companies, whereby leaders empowered and enabled the customer care staff to give out the refunds of the value that they see fit, whereas leaders would have put that at a higher level. The customer care staff might put it at a lower level, saving the company millions of pounds, but also making it actually right and appropriate that they saw and empowering them to make those choices. So I think more than anything, we need to really be able to listen to our employees and listen to our customers in developing an agile mindset and using those principles of user-centered design and understanding both from our employees' perspective and our customers' perspective about how, where and when we're developing any products and any services, and taking the principle, I guess, in agile design too, of the minimum viable product. I mean, not building something and releasing it, but actually working with small agile teams to do a just ready for market execution that people can help and shape together. So just wrapping up on that really, and I mean there are loads of things that I could share with you, and it's been an absolute pleasure to share some of these stories with you, and I just want to say it's been absolutely compelling to understand how customer experience is changing. Over to you.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was really insightful, actually, and some great examples of the dramatic change that's taking place at the moment and how we're looking to adapt to it in all walks of customer experience and employee experience as well. One thing I picked up on actually is we have Simon Johnson from NatWest Group, who's part of our customer panel session, and NatWest Group, previously known as RBS, have seen an absolute surge in inquiries around mortgage holidays, credit card holidays, small businesses that have employees and directors that are looking to, benefit from the furlough scheme and how they're going to plug the gap through not being able to function. So, yes, a lot of subjects there that really resonate. So we truly appreciate it. I'm going to summarize because there's some really good takeaways there. So home is the new normal. I think that's front of mind for everybody. People are adapting already, and there's a real learning mentality that we're seeing that's really shining through, which is really great to see. And I agree with you on the empathy side. Empathy's definitely increased. I've had a few emails myself where people first of all ask, "How are you? Hope you're okay. Stay safe." And then obviously the brand values and the trust. Along with expectation driven from data and starting with data insights. So, people really care. It's really important that brand value and trust is aligned with customer experience. And then nothing stands still, as you've said. So, change can be used as a positive force. I was right. You definitely are an optimist, and technology is the enabler. So, having an agile mindset will win the day. Listen to your customers and employees to build out your strategy. So, all really good examples, and great insight from you, Tiffany. We really appreciate you taking the time. So we're going to open it up to further questions now, and once again, really appreciate your contribution, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. I really enjoyed putting it together, and delighted to ask more questions and answer more questions now.